Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second part of the first webinar in English through the virtual platform unitedforseniors.org. These events are supported by United Way Broward, the Coalition on Behavioral Health and Drug Prevention, Broward Behavioral Health Coalition, the Florida Department of Children and Families, and Latin to Latin. Today, we will continue with the topic, do you know the type of brain you have? And for that, we have Stella Tokar, a neuroencoding specialist and mind master coach, Amazon bestselling author, former TV host, former military wife, and professional. Welcome back, Stella.
Thank you for having me back. This is exciting.
Thank you. So let's start, right?
Let's begin.
Okay,
Let's begin.
perfect.
Well, thank you, Angela, for inviting me back and being able to share this really important information. It's kind of knowing your brain type is kind of like knowing your personality type, or knowing your love language, or your spiritual gift, or knowing yourself intimately is called spiritual intelligence. It has really nothing to do with religion. It can include your religion and your faith, but spiritual intelligence is about knowing yourself from the soul of who you are inside out and living life from the inside. And all of that starts with how we think. My motto I shared last time is whatever controls your mind has the power to dictate the outcomes of your life. That's how we live life. Our belief system, our habits, our behaviors, all exhibit themselves externally, and how we behave, how we think, how we interact with each other, how we interact with ourselves. But everything in life starts with how we think. And the model that I shared, I'm going to share with you again, but we're going to jump into the 5 basic brain types that we learned about at the last session, and we're going to review those a little bit more intimately today so that we can get into number 6 through 16, because really there are 16 different brain types. The first 5 are the basic core brain types, and then 6 through 16 are combinations of those core types that make up number 6 through 16. So let's get started. As Angela already mentioned, I'm really excited to have launched just this past couple weeks Mindset Mastery. I'm part of an anthology, 10 authors that were invited to put this book together, and you can get it on the Amazon author page. And that's my QR code right there. So you can just click onto that, go right to that QR code. It's going to take you to the Amazon page. And I make no money on this. This is basically just to get this awesome information into your hands and into your lifestyle. So let's get started. These are the 5 basic brain types. We started out balanced is just a brain type. It doesn't mean you have it all together. It doesn't mean you're perfect at everything you do. It simply means that your resilience is at such a high level that you tend to experience life and experience emotions just like all the other brain types, but your resilience is so intact that you bounce back quickly. You navigate your emotions in a much more balanced type of environment, in a way where your resilience just bounces you back right to life. So that's what the balanced brain type is like. It's a symmetrical activity between all the parts of your brain. And if you remember last week, and I encourage you, if you weren't with us last week, to go back to the recording and see the diagram of all the moving parts of the brain. Those activities are happening 100% all the time without us even navigating or telling our brain to do anything. It just naturally, organically, God-given activity of how the brain is structured biologically and scientifically and how it works. So if all those things are going on, and neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to organically, naturally reinvent itself, repair itself, and that activity is taking place, then we have the responsibility to know how it works and how to take advantage of it and make it work to our advantage rather than letting the brain make up its own realities. And it will do that. It'll make up its own realities. It doesn't know right from wrong. And so we want to be a part of the process. And that's what brain type is all about. So the balance is just the balanced brain just has the resilience to bounce back quickly. It's very symmetrical in the way it manages the thoughts that go into the brain. And then the spontaneous, the frontal lobe, remember, is the executive center that helps us to make our decisions. It's analytical. It stores a lot of information so it can pull it out at a moment's notice and help us make an informed decision. And so the frontal lobes don't work hard enough. It's very sleepy. So the spontaneity of that brain type is that they don't make informed decisions. They're very, they jump to it right away, and they make a very emotional decision because the brain will use the thoughts that go into the limbic system, our emotional center, and it doesn't have the ability to transfer it to the frontal lobe to gather the information to help us make an informed, balanced decision. And so therefore, the sleepiness of that prefrontal cortex is allowing the brain just to be very emotional. So that's why they don't have this is sleepy, so they are very impulsive without thinking through their decisions. The persistent brain, now that frontal lobe works too hard. It's on overdrive. It's too analytical. It's got too much information going on. It doesn't incorporate the balance of being empathetic or sympathetic. The emotions aren't there. So this is working too hard. And these are the people who are very stoic, and you think they have no emotion and they're just work, work, work all the time. They're very serious about life. And so that's because they're on overdrive here. So the sensitive brain is just what it sounds like. They're super hypersensitive. They operate almost solely out of the limbic system, their emotional center, and it works way too hard. They overanalyze everything, and their feelings get hurt all the time. And then they oh, well, what if? And so they're not really sure how to navigate their emotions very well or keep them in check. And then there's the cautious person. The anxiety of a cautious person is on overdrive, and they're anxious about everything. So the amygdala, which is part of the limbic system, and the basal ganglia, which is in the middle of the brain and just outside of the emotional center, those two things are more active than average, and that puts them in a very cautious, questioning, anxious state. They're afraid to make decisions about anything. So this diagram, and you'll be able to see it in the other presentation as well, it gives the findings of defining all 5 basic brain types. The attributes is in the next column. What makes this brain happy and what makes it unhappy? So we're going to dive into that part of it just a little bit, and then we're going to get into 6 through 16. So, and Angela, I'm not monitoring the chat, but if there's a question that comes up in the chat, if you want to bring it forward, then I don't mind pausing for a moment and allowing that. And then we'll have some time at the end also for some Q&A. So feel free to share some thoughts and comments in the chat. So we imagine that people, because our thoughts are inside our head, we just imagine that nobody knows what I'm thinking. It doesn't matter what I'm thinking. Nobody's going to find out anyways, but that's not true, because how we think is how we feel. And this thinking, this head and heart connection is very strong. Our thoughts can deceive our hearts. Our thoughts, our brains can lie to us. They can make up its own reality. And sometimes our emotions are so deep, our episodes of life run really deep into our core, our soul, like I said, our spiritual intelligence. And if that thought is unrealistic, or if it's a lie and we believe it, it becomes part of our belief system, it will drive us into conflict. Confusion and conflict start taking place and we question everything. So we have to be very careful on how we monitor the episodes of our life and how we process them. So our thoughts and feelings are connected very quickly. So this is happening all the time. Thoughts and feelings, thoughts and feelings. Well, pretty soon actions might come out of those thoughts and feelings. And if it's healthy, fantastic. If it's not healthy, then we can be in trouble. So thoughts, feelings become actions. Thoughts, feelings become actions. And if they're actionated enough, if that's a word, actionable enough in our life and show up enough in our actions, they become behaviors and habits. And once they become behaviors and habits, they're exposed. So our thoughts do get exposed just by the way we believe and the way we behave. So don't ever think that nobody's going to know, because eventually it's going to show up in how you behave and what your actions reveal. So that's the process. Every single person has thoughts, feelings, actions, behaviors. Easy to remember. So this is how the brain wants to operate. It wants to tighten control of thoughts, emotions, and actions. And prefrontal cortex is working with the rest of the brain and gathering information from our limbic system, our emotions, and it likes to be unstressed. It's very systematic in the way it prefers to operate. It loves systems. But when we're stressed, you see how it weakens our control. It weakens our thoughts. Our thoughts start rambling all over the place. And our amygdala, remember, that's part of the emotions, and it begins to confuse us. And pretty soon we're living a lie. We're behaving under the assumption that something is real. Remember, fear. Let me give you the definition of fear. F-E-A-R. False evidence appearing real. Fear is false evidence appearing real. And if you're in a court of law, false evidence does not hold up in court, right? And it's the same, you have to think about it the same way in your thoughts. If your brain is lying to you, or if it's confused and those thoughts start feeling real, your actions and behaviors will start revealing what you believe, and it may not even be true. That's why brain health, keeping our brain as healthy as possible and knowing our thinking style, really helps us to help it to be more systematic rather than random and all over the place. So the balanced brain type, what makes them happy is healthy relationships, meaningful work, and financial security or stability. What makes this brain unhappy is excessive risk-taking, missing assignments, and being around people who are unpredictable, negative, or don't play by the rules. They like to follow systematically. Their life is set up and pretty organized, actually. That's why they're so balanced in the way that they think. So everything works symmetrically in their brain. On the spontaneous brain, what makes it happy is trying new things, trying an extreme sport, watching scary movies. These are the people who don't shield their eyes at the movies when it's scary. But what makes this brain unhappy is boredom, sameness, familiarity, that spontaneity, those rash decisions, kind of give them a shot of dopamine, kind of perk them up. So they need to constantly try new things and like extreme sports. If it's a healthy activity, then it's going to give them the boost that they need to feel. But if it's unhealthy activity, then it's going to hurt them. It's going, that's how they get addicted and get into things that they shouldn't. So having a deadline makes them unhappy because it's, it's not spontaneous, it's very systematic, and they have to work towards it. And having to wait in line, they're not very patient. So that's a little bit about the spontaneous brain. The persistent brain is happy when they're being in charge, having respect of others, and have predictable days. because they're persistent. They like to plod along persistently and have some system. What makes them unhappy is people who don't do what they said they were going to do. So if somebody doesn't make a promise, but says they're going to do something and they don't do it, that kind of drives them crazy. Failure is tough for this particular brain type, and having rules change. They like things persistent. They like things to go along systematically. And when you change the rules in the middle of the game, especially, it really unsettles their thought process. The sensitive brain, listening to calming music makes them happy. Thinking deep thoughts. These are deep feeling people. You can count on them. They're loyal almost to a fault. They're deep thinkers. They feel everything very deeply. Writing, painting, they're usually very creative and expressive with their emotions. And they can really tell a good story, get the facts. What makes them unhappy is negative thoughts that won't go away. They tend to ruminate. Sensitive, they're said, well, I hurt that person's feelings. Maybe I should apologize. Well, I tried to apologize. They won't accept my apology. Now what do I do? And I want to be in relationship with that person, but see, they don't like conflict. They like everybody to get along. Being socially disconnected from others bothers them, and driving on busy boulevards. This brain type has a lot of sometimes road rage. It just drives them crazy. They don't, and I know I have a road rage person in my family, so I understand how that happens. So those are cautious is the last one. Happiness comes to this cautious brain type by everything being in place and having a place for everything. A warm bath at the end of the day just kind of really relaxes them, brings the soothing to their soul. Making pros and cons list before a big decision. I used to do this with my son. He had big decisions to make about his job or college or whatever. We'd sit down and we white paper. We called it white paper, pros, cons, and then we decipher what he thought would be best. What makes us unhappy is being in a chaotic environment. They're the people who like their blinds drawn in their office so that they don't see any other activity. Too many windows drive them crazy because there's too much activity outside of where they're at. Being late for an appointment. My husband says if I'm not 15 minutes early, I am late. So military might have something to do with that. Having too much to do, too much on their plate. Their checklist needs to be short and concise and really prioritized. So those are the 5 basic brain types. A little description, what the scientific SPECT scan findings were, what makes them happy and unhappy. So now that gives you the basis of what the 5 brain types look like, going into 6 through 16, we're going to start combining 2, 3, 4, and 5. Number 1 will not always be left on its own because it's a balanced brain type. Once you're a cautious brain type, you can always improve your brain health. That you're not stuck with the brain you have today. If you took the little quiz and it came up cautious or spontaneous, it doesn't mean that you're stuck there. It means that you can always improve and get better within your brain type, but you're not going to move from cautious to balanced. Balance kind of stands on its own. So that's why the combinations will be 2, 3, 4, and 5. And you'll see that as we go along. So any questions yet in the chat, Angela? Anything?
No, nothing. Everybody's like so quiet so far.
I know. I hope this is not so academic that you feel like you're taking a test. I really want this to be as interactive as possible. And like I said, we'll have some time at the end for some questions as well. So let's get into 6 through 16. I hope 1 through 5 made sense and gave you enough information to kind of decipher what's coming next. So as we get into 6 through 16, number 6 is spontaneous and persistent together. So when I thought I put that chart together for you to come up again. We'll come back to the chart and look at this. Spontaneous and persistent. And if you remember some of the attributes of this, when you can start considering all the things that are going on inside just one of those brain types, spontaneous or persistent, then you're going to understand the challenges that people have with 6 through 16. It's enough to have, I'm just going to go back to that grid. I meant to make another copy of it. I'm sorry. Let me just go back. Let me just remind you, spontaneous, the frontal lobes are working too hard. Don't work very hard. Persistent, they work too hard. So now you've got spontaneous and persistent together. Can you imagine the conflict within that brain? One of them works too hard, the prefrontal cortex, and the other one doesn't work hard enough. So as it cycles through those two brain types, you can imagine the confusion that is thrown into how that person thinks. One day they could be this, or even within the day, they could be this and shift to this. So already the brain is working against itself. And so brain health includes when you take the little quiz, the link that was sent out with your invitation, an email will come back to you with your brain type. It'll identify your brain type. It'll have all this information, spec findings, the attributes, what makes your brain happy, what makes it unhappy. It'll have suggested eating foods that go well with your brain type. It'll have suggested supplements, suggested activity. See, all of those things, supplements, food, activity, feed into your brain and the health of your brain. My SPECT scan revealed I'm going to be 70 in a few months, in 2026, the first part of the year. But my SPECT scan revealed that I had a 50-year-old brain. See, I've been working really hard most of my life to eat right, exercise, take care of myself. My mother didn't do that. And I promised myself I would break that generational cycle of going to the doctor, staying on top of my health, understanding genetically what's going on, what I'm inheriting, as well as what am I imposing into my life that's lending to me not thinking well, not behaving well, to build a belief system that is healthy about how to navigate life and how to process the episodes of my life. That's really important. So your little report that comes straight from the Amen Clinic, this is a Dr. Daniel Amen quiz. It takes you about 8 minutes to take the quiz and get the information back. And you'll have all this at your fingertips. This is not a SPECT scan. This is not looking at the actual function of your brain. It's just identifying based on your answering the questions as truthfully as you can. It's going to identify your brain type. So let's move on to that. Again, let me remind you, persistent is too hard prefrontal, spontaneous, it's not hard enough. Sensitive is the emotions center, the emotions are on overdrive, and cautious anxiety is just part of that cycle of everything you think comes from an anxious point of, and you question everything, and anxiety does that to you. So 7 is spontaneous, persistent, and sensitive. Now 3 different brain types are combined. So attributes and things that make it happy and things that make it unhappy, all of those descriptions now are added together, which even throws in another dynamic. And then we get to number 8. Number 8 is spontaneous, persistent, sensitive, and cautious. That's all 4 of them. Can you imagine? I have a type 1 brain, and I know people with a type 8 brain, and I am married to one who's a type 8. So I live with this mindset, with this person who navigates and is doing so much to be healthy, have his brain healthy. Some things were imposed through the military that he has a brain condition on. Some were genetic, he inherited from somewhere down the line. But what we're doing, because of the awareness that this brings forward into our marriage, into my personal life, his personal life, our marriage, our children, and our grandchildren, we're actually using the information to make a generational impact for the rest of our kids, grandchildren, and generations of Tokars that we will never meet. Having this knowledge, sharing it with our children, helping them understand and navigate some of the neurodiversity that's showing up in our grandchildren is making a huge impact in our family. And if nothing else, you might be a balanced brain and think, oh, well, I've got it pretty much all together. But there are people in your life, work, family, maybe you're married to somebody who needs the information. You need to understand the other brain types, because relationship is what we do, right? Being in relationship with others, whether it's professionally or personally, we are relationship driven beings. Where I've heard it said this way. We're spiritual beings. Remember, I talked about spiritual intelligence, the core of who we are. We're spiritual beings having an earthly experience. We're experiencing everything that earth has to offer us, but we're really at the core, we're mind, body, and soul. That's how we navigate life, right? So then we get to number 9, persistent, sensitive, and cautious together. And then number 10 is persistent and sensitive. So persistent, remember that frontal lobe is working too hard, but then the sensitive one is the one that works directly out of the emotional center, the limbic system. So you can imagine this is on overdrive, but then the limbic system is on overdrive as well, because they're very sensitive. And so those two things are not talking to each other. And the brain needs that navigation to be systematic and symmetrical, not just coming from one area over another and dominating over the other areas of the brain. So that's what throws the brain into conflict. So then we move into number 11, is persistent and cautious together. 12 is almost like number 8. It's spontaneous, persistent, and cautious. That cautious is that anxiety-filled person questioning everything. What if, what if, what if? 14 is spontaneous and sensitive. I think that's a real challenging one. I think they're all very challenging. 15 is spontaneous, sensitive, and cautious. And then 16 is sensitive and cautious together. So when you consider the challenges that might come along with this, I want you to flip that negative thought. Yeah, you're right. There are going to be, in every brain type, balance has its challenges too. It just means that we tend to resolve them quicker than the other brain types. That's all. But the challenges are still there and very real. So all of this could be looked at as challenge, or like we're doing generationally to make an impact, you could look at it, new information, new opportunity to do something good for myself, to get to the soul of who I am through my thoughts before it ever becomes a behavior. It's an opportunity to make a difference for my family. It's an opportunity to make a difference in my workplace. You can view people so much differently and in a very healthy state. If we're going to have if spiritual beings having an earthly experience, we're having experience with each other, right? Look around us. Look at how the news is portraying humanity right now. But the opportunities are to have better understanding about myself and about the world around me so that we can make decisions better for each other and not just for myself. We don't live on this earth by ourselves. The more we understand ourselves and others, amazing things can happen. And that's why I love United Way. I don't mean for this to sound like a plug, but that's why I love United Way, because we're making a difference in people's lives on purpose. And so when we understand ourselves, then we can help other people understand themselves as well. So my questions are, as we come to our Q&A time here in just a moment, I'm sorry, I went one too far, is remember my motto: whatever controls, whenever you might get overwhelmed thinking, oh, I can't deal with my brain type, or I'm a little scared to step into this, or, again, false fear is just false evidence appearing real. It is not real. The brain will make up its own realities. If you don't get involved in the process and understanding it and take control of some of this process, then it will always make up its own realities. And it may not always be true, but it'll be what you believe and it'll be what you act out on. So false evidence appearing real. Remember that definition. And then whatever controls your mind has the power to dictate the outcomes of your life. So what is occupying your mind? How is it navigating? Being aware of your mindset and how to set it up to serve you and to serve others is going to dictate a different outcome to your life. And it's up to you to do that. It's your choice in how you navigate it and what tools you put in place to get you to the healthy place that your brain type needs to be. So then you ask yourself, this is just a little grid, and you'll have this in the PowerPoint, and when you rewatch the recording, is I think, take your brain type and write how you think. Your preferred style of thinking, what's going to get you to that healthy mindset. I feel, analyze how your thoughts are making you feel. If they're making you feel automatically negative, that's called killing the ants, the automatic negative thoughts. Recognize that and say, how does this thought and emotion make me feel? How would I prefer to feel? And how do I flip it? What do I need to do to flip it? How's it making me feel? How would I rather feel without it? And how do I flip it to work to my advantage? And then remember, that drives your belief system. Then you have to answer the question, I believe, ... How is this working to build your belief system? Because what you believe is going to drive you to action, and which brings you to the next question, that next box in the exercise is I will. What action are you going to take based on that thought, that feeling, and that belief? So now, how are you going to put that into action? How are you going to make it work for yourself? So that's a little bit this is a 3-hour workshop. It's very interactive. We get real busy with this and we talk a lot throughout the workshop, the 3 hours. So it's not 3 hours of lecture. You're not in college, but it's a very interactive way to gain the tools and the knowledge that you need to actually walk away from that workshop and put it to work for you today. So that's what that exercise is all about. So because we're on an abbreviated time together, I want to give you opportunity to ask some questions or make some comments, and just remind you that that QR code will lead you to a landing page that will put us in contact with each other, and I will be glad to offer you a courtesy introduction, a discovery call together, and we can take the conversation to the next level if you need to. So Angela, I'm going to take it back to you to the chat and to facilitate some questions or some comments. And I'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Stella. It has been really an eye opener because sometimes we don't even know why we feel like that. Sometimes we don't even question our feelings or our actions or our thoughts. So it's very important. I truly believe that this is something that we should consider, and also teaching our kids, our grandchildren, everybody, our husbands, just like what you said. I think that for the wealth of our, like a state of mind, I think it's very important to make sure that we know why we think the way we do, right? All right,
Yep.
so let's see. Here we go. We see some comments here. Chris said that your husband is right. So it was when you were mentioning yeah, about the brain. And so do people ever assume they correspond with the brain type, but then the scan reveals something else? That's one of the questions. Do people ever
Okay.
assume they correspond with the brain type, but then the scan reveals something else?
If I understand the question correctly, and please jump in if I'm getting it wrong. You're saying if you assume you're a brain type just by reading some of the information, but take the quiz, you might be able to discover that you're a different brain type. Is that correct?
I think that's what they are trying to
Okay.
say. Oh, yes, they said yes.
And that's pretty common. People will, just based on information like this, if people show up to the workshop and they haven't taken the quiz, the first thing we do is give them 10 minutes to take the quiz. Because if they don't and they sit through the workshop and do the work on an assumption of what they think their brain type is, they may be totally off base. My husband, when he got his SPECT scan, the first SPECT scan he got was from a different source, diagnosed him with ADD. Well, I've known, having been an educator, I've known he's had some ADD symptoms because I'm married to him. It will be married 50 years, so I know this guy pretty well. And while he was in the military, there was no testing available for something like this, so he just didn't go there. And we made the assumption that he probably had ADD. Well, when he got out and he had a SPECT scan through the Amen Clinic, who I trust implicity, he made the SPECT scan popular in psychiatry and counseling. And he had symptoms of ADD, but he was not diagnosed with ADD. He actually had other things going on in his brain. And so the few symptoms that he had that kind of jumped out and looked like ADD were not helping him in these other areas. So now, this has been 10 years ago, now he's pulling himself together, he's eating right, he's taking the right supplements. We're going to have him tested for medication on some of these other disorders, but he doesn't have a clinical diagnosis of ADD. And so we can't just, by the time people are behaving a certain way, and based on his behaviors, I thought he had ADD, and so did he. And so we read up on it, and this is my line of work. And we weren't doing anything wrong to treat that, but that was an assumption we made. And until you actually get a clinical diagnosis of something, don't make the assumption, because you have no idea how the brain is actually functioning and what really is standing out. And the same with the quiz. The quiz is not a SPECT scan, but it will guide you in the right direction of what your brain type is, and then it'll give you some recommendations. And if the recommendations aren't working for you, then your next step is to get a SPECT scan if you really want to know how your brain is actually functioning. So assumptions can be deceiving. Remember, what's out in public in behavior may not be exactly what's happening in the brain.
And Okay, so and then what you were saying about the different types, people can move from type to type if they do like the work consciously, if they took the food that they need, they can move from type to type or no? Like, okay, so I'm now going to be more focused or more organized, or I'm gonna try to change so I can become more balanced. Is that possible thanks to the neuroplasticity or no? What?
Typically, a brain type spontaneous will not become balanced. Persistent will not become balanced, or persistent will not become cautious. The cluster, if you're 6 through 16, or even if you're just one, if you're just spontaneous, you will get well within your brain type. You can get better. You're not stuck with maybe some of the negative attributes of your brain type are really holding you back. So what this does is gives you the knowledge and the opportunity to use the tools to become healthier within your brain type. You can be a very healthy, spontaneous person if you know what to navigate, if you know what's driving your spontaneity, and you know that prefrontal cortex is not operating strong enough to help you make an informed decision, and so therefore you're just off the wall and making rash decisions. But you can get that under control. By the way you eat, the way you exercise, maybe you do need medication for that. But when you diagnose how the brain is actually functioning and where that spontaneous brain is operating out of, you can activate the sleepy parts of your brain by doing certain things. You can mitigate if something is working too high, too strongly, you can calm that down. And in those dark areas where something's not working at all, you can bring that up. All by the way you eat, the activities you're involved in, medications you might need, supplements you might need to maintain certain areas. I take a supplement. I had a traumatic brain injury, and I take a supplement called Focus and Energy. It's a Dr. Amen supplement. And it is helping my cognitive process because that was damaged in my accident. I couldn't put my sentences together for 7 months. And there were certain words that I could hear in my brain, but I couldn't say them. And by eating right, getting back to exercising as best as I could, and on my supplements, I don't need medication, but my supplements are helping to keep that area of my brain operating in a healthy state rather than going dark. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. And also, I love what you spoke about the fear, right? The fear, the false evidence appearing real. Oh my
Mhm.
goodness. Because sometimes it's like, what is the fear, right? Like you need to go to the root and then try to understand, right? And it's false evidence, right? It's maybe some thoughts that we had in the past, some experiences that we had in the past or something that they are not right now in the present, but we bring them to the present time. And then we
Exactly.
act out of the fear.
And
So
it may not
that,
even be real, something that we need to be, and it could be some traumatic episode of life. It could be external, imposed. It could come from a lot of places, but it's not all emotional driven trauma or fear that messes our brain up as well. I was afraid of snakes. I had an experience with a snake when I was 4, and I was helping in the yard, and I was picking up leaves, and I picked up a garden snake, which is harmless, but I didn't know that. And it wrapped itself as I picked up the leaves, it wrapped itself around my arm immediately, and I passed out. The next thing I knew, my mother was leaning over me inside the house and with a wet cloth on my head and bringing me back. And from that day on, I couldn't even look at a snake. I couldn't go into the reptile house at the zoo. I couldn't even watch it on TV. The fear was so deep. I just had a traumatic experience on a snake until I was married and my children were in high school already, and they had a youth director at their church that was totally into nature, and they had snakes and all kinds of things that in their house as pets. And one day she brought a snake to one of the youth meetings, and my office, well, I was in an office, it wasn't my office, where there was only one door in and one door out, and everything, no windows, nothing, was just a closed. And I happened to be in that office, and she came in with this snake around her neck. And I told her, I said, Donna, I'm deathly afraid of snakes. Please step out or let me step out. And she said, oh no, there's no better way to get over your fear of snakes than to touch it, hold it. I said, no, not today. I have to be prepared to. And she forced the issue. It was a 15-minute event. And I was sweating, I was crying, I was shaking, and she just came towards me slowly, 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 and I touched the snake. And I felt like I was going to get sick. That's how upset my thinking became part of my body, and my body became part of my soul. And I mean, I felt this emotion so deeply that I was going to get sick. And
Wow.
and I have to tell you, that broke my fear. Little by little after that, I became more brave, and I can now walk into the reptile house. I can watch it on TV. So you see, it's false evidence appearing real. I had made up in my mind such a real fear that I couldn't go near it. And when I was faced with it and I actually touched it, she didn't make me hold it, but I did touch it. There was a release. And see, that's how fear is. That's how anxiety is. The other brain types with some of the things that make it unhappy, and we just need to be aware of that and work towards reconciliation with that emotion. We can live with fear. Fear is a basic emotion. We need to learn to live with it, but not to the extreme where it destroys us as humans or it destroys each other. The fear that we live in culture right now is very real, but it doesn't mean we have to manage it the way it's going and take the actions that some people are taking. You see, we have an opportunity to be the best version of ourselves for the sake of all humanity, not just ourselves.
Wow, I love it. And when you mention about how taking care of our own brain helps our next generations, that's amazing. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that I love when you mention like the mind, body, and spirit, or mind, body, and soul. Maybe it would be nice to have like what is the concept of what is the difference between the mind and the soul? How do how do you explain that?
Sure, sure. When we think about body, mind, and soul, in that order, the body, when you think about the body, it's just the organs, the flesh, the skin, the liver, the lungs, the brain, the heart. That's the body. It's physical. It's the physical creation of where we live inside this body. Now, what's inside the body and how it functions gets into the mindset. It gets into the function. It's like if you go to a cardiologist, I used this at the last session. If you go to a cardiologist, he's not going to say, he or she is not going to say, well, Stella, how do you think your valves have been working since I saw you the last visit? Do you think your valves are opening and shutting correctly? Enough blood flow is getting through there? How are you feeling about the health of your heart? No, they're not going to do that. My cardiologist says, I need you to go get an echo. I need EKG. They look at the function of the brain and they tell me the condition of the brain. Well, Dr. Amen made the SPECT scan to do the same thing for the brain. He said, why are we the only profession that don't look at the organ that we're treating? The function of the brain is what's going to tell us what's going on, why that person's behaving the way they are, why they're speaking, why they're so angry all the time, or why they are so timid that they can't handle conflict, or, the brain will tell you why it's functioning, why you're behaving the way you are just by the way you're functioning. So when we have the body, we're talking about the brain, it's part of the body. The mind that's inside the brain is how you process. That becomes part of the mind, the body, mind, and soul. So now we're talking about the mind and the soul being connected. That's how we're functioning, where our belief systems are, how we are calculating episodes of our life, how we're processing the thoughts that go into our brain, and having a healthy enough brain that that thought can navigate to where it needs to go to make a healthy decision for my life or for my family's life or for at work. And so then the soul, like I started with, is your spiritual intelligence, how the soul of the person. You've heard comments like that, oh, he's such an old soul. It's the way the person's belief system is driving their behavior, who they are at the core of their significance, their meaning in life comes out of their soul, how they show up for life. And sometimes that's healthy, sometimes that's unhealthy. So see, the body, the mind, and the soul all have to work together. That spiritual intelligence deep inside of you, like I said, doesn't have to be faith driven, but it can include your faith. Mine does. I'm a woman of faith. So my soul, my core, my values are built around the foundation of my faith. And that drives how I live my lifestyle. So see, that's where your soul is. What is driving how you behave, and how are you putting together your mind and your body to create that core, that significant self that you want to be and show up as.
Beautiful.
That makes sense?
Absolutely, it's beautiful. And there is another question in the chat. I missed it. Let me see. It says, thank you for sharing this, your amazing research among diet and exercise and stopping the negative thoughts. What would you say is the most important out of all of these to cure our brains?
Well, it's not just one thing, because every brain physically is created the same. The body part of our brain is we all have a brain. We have that in common. But how we create the mind within the brain will dictate what tool we need to use first to get healthy. One of my husband's prescriptions, because remember, he's a number 8, he's 2, 3, 4, and 5. He's all of those brain types. One of his prescriptions from his doctor through the SPECT scan revealed that his prefrontal cortex is very sleepy. In fact, sometimes it's very dark, and which means it's hardly operating at all. So one of his exercises and tools he was given was gratitude journal, bringing that cognitive awareness of what to be grateful for, because also some of he's a sensitive brain type, he's all 4. So the sensitive brain type keeps pulling him back into things to not be grateful for and questioning, a lot of anxiety. So the gratitude journal, either at the end of the day or the start of the day, helps him to remind himself of so many things he can find to be grateful for, no matter what's going on in life. The second thing that was prescribed is ANTS therapy, automatic negative thoughts. There are 9 ants that are typical to everybody. So in that workshop, we go through the ants, or that coaching sessions. We go through the ants. You take an ant quiz, just like you did a brain type quiz. You find out which ant your brain is dealing with most. And most of the time, it's 2 or 3 ants working together. And you want to kill that ant. You don't want it living with you or anywhere near you. you want to start managing it. So whatever you need to do to manage that ant, let's say it's ruminating. You can't let go of something and you keep thinking about it over and over and over again. That's one of the ants. And so there are certain things that you have to do to stop that pattern. See, the pattern interrupt is an important part of killing the ant. Remember, recognizing the pattern, the ant, calling it out, call it by name if you need to. I verbally get involved when I have an ant coming up in my to ant. This is my brain. I'm in control. Not today. Not today. I'm not even entertaining you today. And I have to talk to myself out loud sometimes. I teach my grandchildren this. Say, okay, not today, Aunt. This is my brain. I'm in control. So that's called a pattern interrupt. So you recognize the thought. How does it make you feel? How would you feel without it? And what do you need to do to replace it with? What are you going to replace it with? I call it the flip. Now flip it. Recognize it, call it out, and say, how's it make me feel? How would I feel without it? What am I going to do to flip it? You see? So it depends on the condition of your brain as to what tool you start with. So I think ANT is foundational. We all have automatic negative thoughts at some degree or another, even a balanced brain. So I think if there was one thing I would recommend, it's ANT therapy for all brain types.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. This is very, very interesting because, as I mentioned at the beginning, sometimes we don't even take the time to think about these things, and they are very powerful. These tools that you're giving us right now, journaling, killing the ants, paying more attention, and how our thoughts become our feelings, our actions, our behaviors, and then our habits, and the character of that we have, how everything is interrelated. And it's amazing. So thank you so much, Stella. I'm not so sure if we have any more questions, but now we know how to find you. And of course, you are part of our United for Seniors. And this event is going to be recorded, it's being recorded, and is going to be posted on the website and also in our YouTube channel. So thank you so much, Stella. Again, thank you all for participating, for all of those questions in the chat, and we will see you some other time, right?
Yeah, and I just want to remind everybody, the neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reinvent itself is happening automatically without you ever telling your brain to do it or to not do it. It's just happening automatically. So now that you know that the brain's already doing this, why not take advantage of it and get involved in that process and think and say, I can't allow my brain to renew all on its own. I have to be involved in that process. And that's what brain types and killing the ants is all about. It's getting involved in the process, taking advantage of it, helping you change the way you see yourself, change the way you see others, and change the way you see your circumstances in life. It will be revolutionary in your life because it goes right along with my motto: whatever controls your mind has the power. What do you want to give that power up to? Has the power to dictate the outcomes of your life.
Wow, beautiful. We need to be more intentional, right? More intentional to become better and better every day. And
Thank you, Angela, for the invitation to be here.
thank you, Stella, and thank you, everyone. Bye bye. Let's see each other during our next seminar. Let's pay attention to the events at our unitedforseniors.org app. Thank you. Bye bye.